Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood lived in a house on the edge of the woods. Her favourite thing in the world was a bright red cloak that her granny had made for her. The cloak had a warm furry lining and a great big hood. Red Riding Hood wore it every day, rain or shine, and that is how she got her nickname. One day, Red Riding Hood's mother made a big batch of hot soup and a dozen soft bread rolls. "These are for Granny," she said to Red Riding Hood. "She's caught an awful cold and has been stuck in bed for days. I need you to take this over to her house. It should make her feel better and give her some strength." "Of course," said Red Riding Hood. "I'd do anything to help Granny." "Just remember," said her mother, "you must stick to the path. And don't get distracted on the way. The soup won't stay hot forever." She poured the steaming soup into a flask and put it with the rolls in a little red bag. "Take care, darling," she said, and waved Red Riding Hood on her way. Granny lived in a pretty cottage right in the middle of the woods. Everyone knew that the woods could be dangerous. Wolves and bears lived among the trees, but you were always safe as long as you stayed on the path. It was a short walk to Granny's cottage, and the path led all the way there. Red Riding Hood stuck to the path as her mother had told her. But before long, the bag of soup and rolls started to feel awfully heavy. Red Riding Hood knew there was a shortcut through the woods. It would take her to Granny's much more quickly, and no one would know she'd strayed from the path. So she chose to set off on the shortcut. The forest was lush and green, but it was very overgrown away from the path. Every few strides, Red Riding Hood had to stop to pull her long red cloak out of the brambles. Maybe this wouldn't be such a quick route after all. Red Riding Hood was tugging at her cloak and wishing she'd stuck to the path when a big grey wolf stepped out from behind a tree. "Hello, little girl," said the wolf, smiling his friendliest smile. "What have you got in that big heavy bag?" Red Riding Hood looked up in alarm. Everyone knew that wolves were cunning and sly and could eat little girls for dinner. But this wolf looked so friendly. Maybe he wasn't that bad after all. "I've got a flask of soup and some bread rolls," she said. "They are to make my granny feel better. She's been very poorly, but some hot food will make her stronger." "That's an excellent plan," said the wolf. "I'm sure your granny will be thrilled. Is that where you're walking to now?" "Yes," said Red Riding Hood. "I must be nearly there by now. Granny lives in the little cottage right in the middle of the woods." "That cottage," said Wolf. "I know just the one. You're nearly there now. I know what. Why don't I stop and pick some flowers? There are so many lovely flowers in the woods. I bet a bunch of pretty flowers would really cheer your granny up." "That's a brilliant idea," said Riding Hood. "I'll do that now. It shouldn't take me very long to pick a few flowers." "Goodbye," said the wolf. "I hope your granny feels better soon." And with that, he walked off, back the way Red Riding Hood had come. "What a friendly wolf," thought Red Riding Hood. "I don't know why everyone thinks they're so scary. I needn't be frightened of him." But the wolf was not as friendly as he seemed. In fact, he had a cunning plan. As soon as he was out of sight, he looped back round towards Granny's house. He knew exactly which cottage she lived in. He would go there now, while Red Riding Hood was picking flowers. It wouldn't take him long. He knew the woods well and could move through them with stealth and speed. The wolf soon reached Granny's house and knocked on the door. Knock, knock. "Who's there?" cried Granny. The wolf made his voice as high and girlish as he could, then said, "It's Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some hot soup and fresh rolls to make you better." "Let yourself in," said Granny. "I'm too weak to get up." So the wolf turned the door handle and stepped into the house. Granny was lying in her bed, tucked up with blankets and soft cushions. Before she could even scream, the wolf had gobbled her up in one big mouthful. The wolf licked his lips and burped, but he was still hungry. "I know," he thought. "I'll eat that little girl too. But first I must trick her into coming in." He put on Granny's nightdress, her nightcap and her slippers and climbed under the blankets on the bed. Now he just had to wait. It wasn't long before Red Riding Hood appeared and knocked at the door. Knock, knock. The wolf made his voice as old and creaky as he could, then called out,
"Who's there?"
"It's Little Red Riding Hood. I have brought you hot soup and fresh rolls to make you feel better."
"Come in,"
said the wolf.
"I am too weak to come to the door."
Red Riding Hood turned the door handle and stepped into the house. She couldn't believe how poorly Granny looked. She was lying in bed with the covers pulled right up to her chin, and she looked awful. "Oh, Granny," she cried in alarm, "I hadn't realised you were this ill." She put down her bag and came closer to the bed. "You look nothing like yourself. Why, look what big eyes you have."
"All the better to see you with, my dear," said the wolf.
"But Granny, what big ears you have."
"All the better to hear you with, my dear."
"But Granny, what big and hairy hands you have."
"All the better for hugging you with, my dear."
"Oh, Granny, what a big toothy mouth you have."
"All the better to eat you with,"
cried the wolf, and he bounded across the room and gobbled the little girl up in one big mouthful. Now the wolf was completely stuffed. After such a big meal, he just wanted a nice long nap. So he snuggled down into the blankets and quickly dozed off. As the wolf was sleeping, a face appeared at the cottage window. It was the huntsman. He had been chopping wood nearby when he had seen something very strange. First, a wolf had walked past him, and then a little girl in a long red cloak. The huntsman knew that wolves were not to be trusted, so he thought that something must be up. Through the window, the huntsman could see the wolf was asleep on a big soft bed. His belly was enormous. He must have swallowed that poor little girl. The huntsman knew at once what he could do. He crept inside the cottage as quietly as he could, and while the wolf slept, he pulled out a pair of scissors and started to snip away at the wolf's stomach. Snip, snip, snip. He could see Red Riding Hood's brilliant cloak inside the wolf's stomach. With another few cuts, snip, snip, the little girl came tumbling out. "Oh, it was very dark inside the wolf. It was horrible," she sobbed. "But where has Granny gone?" The huntsman kept cutting, snip, snip, and Granny came rolling out onto the floor. "Oh, I was so frightened," said Granny. "Thank goodness you are all right, Red Riding Hood."
"Now what shall we do with this wolf?" said the huntsman. "We can't just leave him here with his belly cut open. We should kill him, or we should sew him up and turn him out into the woods."
"You can't just set him loose," said Granny. "Just think how dangerous he is. Let's not kill him, but we could make him a bit less dangerous." So they filled the wolf's stomach with stones and sewed him up again. The stones made the wolf very heavy and slow, and they rattled and shook when he walked. This made it hard for him to sneak up on people. He wasn't fast enough, and everyone could hear him coming. This made life rather difficult for the wolf, but it certainly made the forest a safer place. All the same, Red Riding Hood never did take the shortcut ever again. The end.